Okay, I think let's just start the class. Nanti bila dia masuk tu, I'll just admit them. Okay. Alright. So as far as I can recall, we finished chapter 2 on history in project management. Good morning, Zulaika. So apa tu? History in project management. Okay, and then we'll move on to the next chapter, which is on project management in Malaysia. Okay, so I think all of you could get the notes from your future, kan? Shouldn't be a problem with the notes, kan?
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on to the third chapter. Okay, so the third chapter is basically on project management in Malaysia. Okay, so I'll just enlarge it. All right, so this is also a topic which is quite general in nature, so it doesn't go into the project management processes right away. Okay, so the next coming chapter basically on project definition is the one that actually kita enter into what is project management processes. Okay, so this one is basically still a general, it is still a general okay, so it is still a general, susah saya nak habis cakap ya.
Doktor, sorry.
Again?
Doktor dah share slide ke?
Oh ya, kejap, belum lagi. Present window. Okay. Alright, so this will be today's chapter, project management in Malaysia. Basically, this chapter is still general. So as I've mentioned, this is still general and it has not entered into the processes of project management. Okay, so chapter 4, which is project definition, will be the first step of your project management. So this is still at a general level, getting to know the industry, getting to know the sector basically. Okay. So basically your learning outcome from this chapter would be, I hope I can conclude this chapter by today. So but I think we are a bit back of the schedule sikit. I think a little bit. So let's see if we can conclude the chapter by today. So it's a very simple chapter. Okay, so basically it talks about it talks about the involvement of project management in Malaysia. Okay, so the effect it has on the economy, the strategic trust for the construction industry. So because every sector they have their strategic trust and it's like a roadmap how to actually develop the industry, how to address the problems in the industry, okay, the challenges and why is it important. Right. So I think this one basically it is well known. I suppose all of you at this moment should be able to understand who are the customers in the construction, who are the parties, who are the stakeholders, and what are we talking about in terms of finished project for construction. When we talk about project, I think I've mentioned it in the last class, every sector has project. Okay, so it is not only construction yang we consider it as a project. Wait, let me check. Did I record it? Ada. Okay, so in terms of project, any sector would have a project. Something that is actually temporary, something that is actually requiring what you call within a certain limitation of resources, time, cost, and so on. Okay, so not only construction. Cuma the difference might be in terms of construction, we are physically bigger. Okay, so our outcome is basically bigger and our outcome is basically more stagnant. If you build a certain structure in a certain place, that is where it is. Okay, so for example, other products or other sectors might have a project which is mobile in nature, software for example, or car prototype for example. So any prototype, so it is more, how to say, mobile. In comparison to ours is basically built there and basically constructed there and completed there. Okay, So just a general definition or general ideas of the industry before we move on. So I suppose everyone understand that whenever we have in a transaction, you would have seller, you would have buyer. Okay, so the customer in our case, okay, so it could include state government, it could include public, it could involve private. Okay, so state and public more or less the same. Cuma state is at the state level lah. Okay, so negeri, and public generally comes from the ministry, federal government. Okay, so for example, the construction of schools. Okay, so usually it comes from the Ministry of Education. Okay, so the allocation comes from the Ministry of Education under the federal government. Tapi if we are talking about state roads, okay, so the roads in terms of jalan kampung, for example, so those could come under the budget of the state government. Okay, so depending on how much or depending on what the state government interest is basically. So funding from the state government at the state level, okay, funding from the federal government, it can be anywhere so long they see the need or requirement in for public interest. Okay, so schools, hospitals, so those are basically could be under certain ministry. Okay, so Ministry of Health and so on. Private basically is profit oriented. Okay, so you can see a lot of private developers developing all these residential areas, commercial areas. So those are basically private, which is profit oriented. Okay, so all these customers, okay, so the trade-off might be different. The project priority might be different. Okay, so if you can recall, we did in the second chapter, project priority metrics. Sometimes will be given to you a scenario where the client would be state or where the client will be public. So and when you actually lay down the acceptance, the enhance the constraint, you need to carefully think from a public perspective or from the governmental perspective, what is the constraint. Okay, so it might not be the same as the private. Okay, so that is where you have to think what are their interests. So if we are talking about public, if you're talking about state government, usually it has to do with people's interests. Okay, so if it is necessary, if it is how to say, it is highly in demand. For example, a certain clinic kesihatan, for example. So this kind of mobile clinics, for example, at rural area, and it is in demand, and you need to provide it. So maybe time is a constraint there. Okay, or time could be enhanced there. So you cannot take ample of time to provide such services because there is a demand and there is a high demand for it. Okay, so when we talk about public state, it is always to do with people's interests, supposedly. Okay, so it is always to do with people's interest. Private, usually it is more on private oriented, okay, or profit oriented, for example. Okay, and those are the customer, or those are the common client. And also one client that sometimes we overlook because we usually think that the person who actually we hand over. So for example, school. Okay, so we hand over to the Ministry of Education. Okay, so for example, school, we hand over to Ministry of Education. But one more customer that we usually overlook would be the end user. Okay, so end user should be cuma we in construction. Okay, we take it lightly. Okay, so the end user's perspective, but they are actually the end customer, the customer who will be using the facilities. So by right, their thought should be taken or should be given consideration. Cuma in the current perspective, not much of the end users' thoughts that we usually take into account. So biasanya when we design a certain thing, rarely that we go to the end user, okay, what do you want in a house? I don't think people do that. Okay, so it goes back to all the private. Okay, so the designers, they have their thoughts and they build it and they sell it. So at the as the end user, you either want to buy it or you leave it as it is. So this is one of the thing that which is currently, how to say, limitation or the lacking in the industry, where we consider, for example, phone, okay, telephone, we consider what the end user wants. Okay, so we want something that is fast, we want something that is clear, good camera and so on. But in construction, rarely that we think in terms of that. Okay, so that is one of the how should I put it, one of the limitations or one of the drawback or one of the item that we overlook. So we usually look into whoever is paying, but the whoever is using to, we don't take into account. So that's one thing yang moving forward, hopefully this could be improved lah. Okay, so end user. All right, so besides that, basically in terms of parties involved, okay, so stakeholders involved, normally you have the main contractor. Okay, so if it's a design bid build, you have the client. Client would actually hire the consultant, and after consultant has completed the drawing, usually design bid build or traditional contract, it will be open tender. Okay, so open tender will be through bidding and so on, and then you will have your main contractor. Okay, so generally the most important parties, you have the client, you have the consultant, you have the contractor. Okay, so consultants are basically um, the architects. Okay, so the CNS engineers, M&E engineers. That's the most common for any project. That is the most common consultant: architect, CNS, and M&E, okay, mechanical electrical engineer. Other than that, if you're talking about a project which might require certain specialization, okay, so if your earthwork is, how to say, heavily involved in the project, then you might require some certain expertise such as geotechnical engineer and so on. So that will be given that your project is specialized in such a nature. Okay, so if you're talking about something to do with dam, for example, so you will need hydrologists, you will need environmentalists and so on. Okay, so those are additional if it's not a typical project. But if it's a typical project, that should be the most obvious stakeholders. Okay, other than that, who else are involved in a project? Other stakeholders besides this? Bagi idea sikit. Who other parties are involved in a construction project besides these main stakeholders and also end user?
Authorities.
Authority, okay, so correct. Authority. Lagi? Who else? Local authorities. So even local authorities, you have technical agencies. Okay, so you have local councils. Okay, so technical agencies are such as KKR, Public Works Department. Okay, Bomba, the fire department. Okay, so drainage. Okay, so those are technical agencies where detailed drawings might go to them. And local councils are basically such as Majlis Daerah, okay. So those were the days where your drawing should go into each agency. Once you get the each agency to support, then you submit it to the local council. Tapi nowadays for projects, basically you can submit your proposal for construction or proposal for development at the one-stop center, basically through the local council. Okay, and the local council would probably distribute all the essential drawings to JKR to ensure that the drawings are okay and could be is potential or is a potential project to be developed. Okay, so when you come up with a project, it is not like I have the money and I come up with a project. Cannot. Okay, so it goes through the council, because each council, they would have their own um, roadmap. Okay, so what do they want to develop in such area? Okay, so if their target is basically on tourism, for example, and if your thought is basically developing a lot of this manufacturing or what do you call it, this commercial area or manufacturing area, so might not be relevant to that certain authority. Okay, so to that certain council. So whatever that you are planning to develop, it should be aligned or sync to the local authority. What is their expectation? So you need to check on what is their roadmap for 10 years to come. So usually they have those roadmap that, okay, in expectation in 5 years, 10 years, how many new houses, or how many what are the areas that we are trying to develop. So once you get that idea, then you can actually propose certain development, rather than you propose it based on your thoughts without looking into what are the targeted development that is required by the council. Okay, so and usually the approval comes from the council, so having the support by the technical agencies. Okay, so usually the approval is by the council, right? So local authority plays a huge role, okay, because they either approve or they either disapprove your development too. So they play, and also the rules and regulation, which might be specific. In general, we have rule and regulation, UABL and so on, but they might be specific to certain area depending on the sensitivity of the area. Okay, so local authorities. Other than that, tak ada. Okay, I'll tell you. Supplier. Okay, so supplier plays a very important role. So it might not look that important, but if you are in a construction and your material comes from a certain supplier and you are in need of that and your project is delayed because of that, they play a huge role. Okay, so especially when you're talking about material supply chain, so how could your material arrive in time for your construction and so on. Okay, so supplier plays a huge role. Other than that, basically are subcontractors and so on. Also, when I mentioned about consultant, it involves also the QS. Okay, so I did not mention QS here. So consultant, it involves also the QS. All right, so that will be the common parties involved. Okay, and when we are talking about construction, the finished product basically should be within the time, cost, quality required. Okay, so this is common lah across construction. So these are the typical variables or typical the triangle basically of project management, and it can involve residential. So residential is common, commercial building, so where you have office building, restaurants and so on, and also infrastructure. Okay, so such as highway construction. Okay, so pipe supply and so on. Okay, water supply and so on. Okay. All right, so in terms of the overview of Malaysian construction industry, it is one of the important element contributes to the Malaysian economy. So if I'm not mistaken, I did mention in the first class that when we are talking about contributing to economy, we are not the only sole contributor. There are many other sectors. Okay, so services, for example, so services involve a lot of different items. Okay, telecommunication, healthcare, education. So a lot of that falls under services. And then we have manufacturing. Okay, and then we have mining, we have logging, fishery, agricultural. Those are contributing sectors as well, and construction. Okay, basically when we are talking about construction, we have the up and downs. Okay, so when economy is not too good, probably we are down. And in 2006, Okay, so our GDP was really low. Okay, so given the situation of the economy, but now we are more or less between 6 to 8%. Okay, in current times. Okay, in current times, basically our contribution is around more or less 6 to 8% of GDP. Still not too high. Okay, so reason being that we are not actually exporting our services that much. Okay, but however, that is one of the notion of the industry of the CIDB basically is to export our services. We are not doing that well in terms of exporting our services, but that is um, one of the aspect they are thinking to actually increase the GDP. Okay, so what is GDP? Gross domestic product. Okay, so it is the market value of all recognized final goods, services produced in the country within a period of time. So basically, it is the indicator of country standard of living. So the higher the GDP, the better lah. Okay, so it is a total income. Okay, so measure of nation's economic well-being and economic growth. Okay, and what is included in GDP? Basically, the consumption of household. If you do not spend, okay, if the people are basically not spending, it does not increase the GDP. Okay, so that's why sometimes during inflation, um, what do we call it? The inflation is getting very much higher. So the government actually provide all this in incentive, like current situation. Okay, so there are a lot of monetary based incentive given to the people so that the economy is running in the country. Okay, so that there are sellers, there are buyers, and the economy is generating, is moving like engine. So when people are not consuming, people are not buying, then the GDP will be low. Okay, so that's why there are a lot of incentive initiative now that involve basically in monetary base. Okay, so consumption by household. Okay, so any form of buying, investment by business household. Okay, so for example, houses, new homes. So that's why there are also incentive given by government in terms of tax reduction, for example, or for new houses and so on. Okay, and another thing which is important when we're talking about contributing to GDP is government's expenditure on people related what do you call projects. Okay, so government expenditure by local, state or federal government on anything related to people based. Okay, so road, school and so on. So those are government spending. So that's why during mega projects, okay, so a lot of when we're talking about mega projects by government, the economy runs very well. Okay, so because the projects are for the people, and also when you have mega project, you run the economy. It's like an engine because you provide employment to the people and so on. So there are manufacturings are moving, finance are moving, people are having money, so you are actually hired as an engineer. So a lot of things are going on when you have something such as a simple or one mega project. Okay, so a lot of things. And the last one is basically on the export. Okay, so the value of export to other nations. Okay, so this one we are a little bit lacking in terms of construction. Okay, so our export is less compared to when we are talking about manufacturing. We export a lot on manufacturing, but construction a little bit far from that lah. Okay, so basically GDP equals to your consumption within the country, investment on fixed assets such as houses, government spending on projects related to people, and also export rather than import. So in fact, in construction, we do import quite a lot actually. Okay, so we have main contractors who are from China, for example. We have projects which are basically governed by Chinese contractors with people from China. Okay, so the workers are from China, the engineers are from China. So those are the things that it needs to be really thought through. Okay, so those are the import So basically, we have quite a lot of import compared to exporting our expertise outside. Okay, so that actually reduces the GDP quite significantly there. Okay, so personal consumption, okay, investment, government, net. Okay, so obviously this one, it would be best that our export value is higher than import. But currently we do have quite a lot of import, but in terms of export, we are still working on how to actually, export the our contractors, consultants overseas to bid for overseas project. Okay, what's not included? Any intermediate goods is not final goods. Okay, so second hand, all those black market tak adalah obviously. Okay, so financial transaction, production, transfer, payment, so those are not. So basically these are the items which are under GDP. Okay. Alright, so in terms of the involvement of project manager, you don't need to memorize this. So just get an idea where PMI has been formed around 1969. So why do you need to know the importance of PMI? So basically they're important because they come out with the PM Book of Knowledge too. If you can recall, it was in the last chapter. Okay, so they produced the Project Management Book of Knowledge. So this is important because this project management book of knowledge, it is not particularly for construction, but it is a very thin guidebook that is applicable for all sectors. Okay, all sectors that involve project. So hence you don't expect when you get a project management book of knowledge to it is specifically for construction, tak ada, it's general. So any project could use this guide to actually run through their project and so on. So it's a very thin book sebenarnya. So the details of it is not that detailed. So it is quite general and is open to perspective of different sectors too. Okay, so project management book of knowledge, and then they also provide this PMP certification. Okay, so PMP certification is basically project management professional. Okay, so project management professional certification. So basically you will need to pay a certain fees. Okay, so and you are allowed to take the examination online. And if you pass the examination, you will be given the certificate of project management. So at this moment, for example, in Malaysia, okay, so we have governing bodies for engineer, we have governing body for QS, architect, tapi for project manager, we don't have a governing body. We can't say that a project a failure because of project manager, tak boleh. Okay, so and we don't have any act to penalize a project manager. All right, so if a student graduated from Bachelor Science in Construction Management, they do not have any governing body. Okay, so dia tak ada act untuk project management, tak ada. Okay, so the closest they can get to have a certain accredited consider their, how to say, their competency is project management professional certification. Okay, a lot of huge companies basically are actually buying in with this and send their workers or send their staff actually to get this certification, just to showcase that you have the competency and credential to actually manage a project. Macam tu lah. Okay, so around 1981 they came out with PM book ni, Project Management Book of Knowledge Guide. So it contains the guidelines of practices. 1994 we have the Malaysian chapter. Okay, and current basically they are looking very much into sustainable development in construction processes. Okay, so I did mention that when you are talking about sustainable, you must look into the economy, the environment, and social. So it does, when you're talking about sustainable, it should involve these three elements. You can't just go by with only mentioning environment and you say that you are sustainable. Tak boleh. Okay, so sustainability involve three dimensions of economy. Okay, so environment and social. Economy meaning to say that your project should be very much value driven. Okay, so it should consider, for example, wait, let me just reduce the size. Okay, so economy, you might conduct something such as value engineering. Okay, so whereby you look into different designs and choose the best option. So the most optimum design with the most optimum pricing and so on. Economy. When you're talking about environment, you talking about reducing the greenhouse gas emission, energy consumption, and so on. Okay, and social. What does social entail here? What do you think projects should look into when we're talking about socially sustainable projects? Saya bagi contoh sikit.
Safety.
Safety, okay, so that's the most common lah. Okay, so safety. What else? Satisfaction. Okay, so particularly from end user. Okay, so all those employment opportunity. Okay, so those are in terms of social. So when we think of a project, it is not only talking about the most optimum, the most value added or value enhanced project. It is not only about saving energy. Okay, so not only about carbon emission reduction, but it also should think about how your project actually benefits the people surrounding that area, how your project benefits the nation in terms of providing employment. If you go further than that, social is about human rights, for example. Okay, so hence the satisfaction of the end user. So a lot of things when you talk about social. Cuma the most common that we can think of and which is relevant to us is basically health and safety during construction. But actually, when you talk about sustainable project, it should span beyond not only construction, but it should span beyond the entire life cycle, starting from the beginning until the very end, until demolition sebenarnya. Okay, so sustainable. So to focus on sustainable development in the construction process. Okay. All right. So what is PMI? Okay, so I think this one we could just go through fast lah. So Project Management Institute ni. So we don't need to dwell much on it. I think this one could be a good summarize what PMI provides. So I did mention it provide this guidebook, okay, the certification of PMP. And then other than that, since we call it as an institution, okay, so Project Management Institute, so they have research center, okay, so they have publication, journals, they provide training, okay, so education, training, professional development, and of course when you have all these institute, hold on, but of course when you have all these institute, it comes along with all those relationship and so on lah, okay, networking and so on. Okay, and networking and fellowship. Okay, so it comes along with that. So it's such as it is similar to IEM. Okay, so Institute of Engineers Malaysia, they provide training, they provide talk, they provide all those platform for engineers to network and so on. Okay, and these are the typical type of PMI certification. Okay, so the most common one ialah ni lah PMP, but it's a little bit expensive in terms of the fees actually. Okay, so objective of certification ni, I did mention, so project management, they do not have one body, a governing body. They do not have a certain act. So how could we say that a project manager is competent enough? Because for example, if you graduated from Bachelor Science Construction Management, okay, you have the fundamental knowledge on managing a project. But how about us? Okay, how because as a civil engineer, So as a civil engineer, our exposure to project management tak banyak. Okay, so in your 3-4 years of study pun, I think only how many subject related to project management. This could be one. Okay, and then you have something related to QS, taking off. You might have EIS a little bit, but it's not a lot. So how can we say an engineer, a managing a project is competent enough? So such certification will give you a certain credit for it. Okay, so hence it will provide this personal recognition, professional advancement, job opportunity, and so on. Okay, so and of course, your certification is globally accepted. Okay, so it is a worldwide certification. So it is not based on country and so on. Okay, so the effect of project management through economy. Before that, so far any question? Tak ada ya? Okay, so if you do not have any question, let's just continue to the next. Okay, and how project management could affect economy. Okay, so I think this is pretty straightforward. Basically, we are talking about the benefits. So first, opportunities to expand services. So obviously, if you have a proper project management, your product could actually go beyond whatever you're actually delivering now. Okay, so you might have the opportunity to expand your services, improve growth, customer satisfaction, better flexibility, increasing quantity, and so on. In a nutshell, basically, when you understand the flow of project management, so when you can understand the processes involved, what are the core value of project management, you can handle any project. So it is not only to do with construction. You can handle, if let's say at one point you happen to join an IT, for example, there is a project you need to manage in the sector of IT. The fundamental process is the same. The management process is the same. Only the subject matter that differs, only the detailing. But as a project manager, you don't need to know the details. You might know in general perspective, but you don't need to know how you actually come up with the software. But you need to manage your project such that your software is produced. So that is what basically this thing means. Okay, so the fundamental understanding of project management could be applied in any sector. Okay, so for example, these are the descriptions for it. Okay, so if you're talking about better efficiency, it provides a roadmap. Okay, so it allows you to have this a roadmap for you to follow. So that's why I mentioned, if you can know the fundamentals, you can know how to manage a project, you can actually use the same principle to manage other projects even in different sectors. Okay, so I think this is the same as what I've mentioned earlier. Okay. Okay, so the next basically challenges faced by Malaysian construction industry. Um, Actually, a lot of challenges. These are not the only challenges. There are a lot of challenges faced by the Malaysian industry. Okay, so one project must be concerned with the environment. Okay, so this is one of the typical project, especially when we're talking about project which might impact the environment in a large manner. Okay, such as the construction or development of a dam. Okay, so when you're talking about dam, you will definitely get into the environment which is purely green. Okay, so getting into such environment and creating something through the green, already green environment, too, that will be a major concern lah. Okay, so environmental is one of the major issue, and that's why when we talk about environment, um, you need to have an EIA, environmental impact assessment. Okay, so usually EIA is produced by environmental consultant if a project requires a EIA report. Okay, apa tu? Environmental impact assessment report. Okay. All right. So next, basically the lack of efficiency and effective approach. How should I put it? When you're talking about lack of efficiency and effective approach, usually what is the counter what is the counter action from here? Usually when we mention lack of efficiency and effective approach. So how do we counter this?
Proper planning.
Proper planning lagi? Any other ideas? When we're talking about lack of efficient, effective approach ni, how do we counter this with? Think guys, there can be a lot. Give me some idea. If we mention lack of efficient, effective approach, what do we commonly tackle? How do we commonly say, okay, because of lack of efficient, effective, okay, we introduce something as such. What?
Macam
Typically,
proper work schedule.
macam planning lah tu. Planning, proper work schedule, lagi. Typical in our industry. What else? Obvious.
Bolehkah kita refer kepada projek-projek yang dah sukses?
Okay. Learning from successful projects. Okay, lagi. Think from our industry sekarang ni. Look into our industry now. Okay, so what are they introducing now? What are they emphasizing now in the industry?
The software, PIM software model.
Software kan. So we are always talking about introducing technology. Okay. So actually this is the one I want to highlight sebenarnya. Okay. So typical, but actually there are a lot of things we can do sebenarnya with all of this. If we can do all of this correctly, we might not actually having much reliance on technology first. Okay, so that's why sometimes in the industry, okay, we see that okay, construction is lacking, lack efficient, lack effective approach, and the first thing they think of would be on technology. Okay, kita introduce technology, but sometimes what they might overlook sebenarnya, the solution is not technology. The solution might come from such as this. Okay, it might come from we repeating the same error every single project. So every single project kita buat, we don't learn. Okay, so there are errors from the last project and we have not documented it. Okay, so it could be as simple as knowledge management sebenarnya. So a lot of things that actually could be based on learning from historical, either a successful project or either an unsuccessful project. It can be a error that has been done, tapi given that you have different engineers going to different project, maybe this project the engineer was not addressed to another project, so hence he doesn't know what could have been the successful factor or what they call factors for error tu. So the knowledge management tak sampai, the knowledge tak sampai to the other people, so hence in the next project other engineers will repeat the same problem. Same goes to when you're talking about process. Okay, so improper planning, improper schedule, those are the things that is to do with people. Okay, so those are the things that to do with people's effectiveness in doing a certain job. So sebenarnya at the end of the day, when you're talking about, but our industry or what is common in basically here, we are talking about okay, lack efficiency, effective, we introduce technology straight away, right away. But is it true? How far is it true that technology could actually help us ensure that we actually could achieve this? So those are the things that we need to actually really think through, because when you're talking about technology, it involves cost, it involves sending your staff for training, huge sum of money. But sometimes when that happen, okay, and suddenly at the end of the day, once you started using, tapi you do not use it until the end of the life cycle, you just use it during design, then it serve no function, it is just atas nama that we are using BIM. So a lot of project basically we kind of like not encourage, especially government projects, so they're moving towards BIM. Okay, so there are certain percentages of a certain cost, above certain cost of a project that require BIM, but how well it is being used. If it's being used the whole life cycle, BIM will be very superb. Okay, especially like projects such as MRT, their dependency on software, the dependency on BIM high, and it gives value to them. So imagine that you need to actually sync your development, sync your operational, sync also with your maintenance, and also sync to your supplier. So if you have such construction, if you have such project, yes, because you are highly dependent for all the other how to say, all the other different parties, especially when you're talking about servicing, maintenance of the train, and so on. So such as MRT, they play a very huge role, starting from the very beginning, starting from the design until the operation, so until the train is operating. Because whatever you input in the design, for example, the supplier of such certain what they call parts, okay, so maintenance parts, so it's sync right away with the supplier from the initial, what type of parts are we talking about. So for MRT, it goes a long way until the operation. Same goes to such as developers. Okay, so for example, Sunway, for example, they build condominium and they sell it out and they maintain it. So it's much easier for them. So they would know what are the maintenance. So it lives until the end of the usage. However, if a project only uses BIM just to find the correlation between the design, architect and CNS and M&E design, only during design, and lepas tu dah tak guna, then it will be a huge waste, because you only use it for one aspect and you are not talking about the long term use of it pun, such as residential areas. Unless you are maintaining it, unless you are in charge of the developed area and you're going to maintain the building, then yes. But if you are just using it at one point, masa design, lepas tu you tak guna, then it is just atas nama lah BIM tu. So very important when we talk about like a efficiency and effective approach ni, it is very subjective sebenarnya, the word here. So it needs to be dug deeper. What are we talking about? Okay, so it can be a simple solution as you got the wrong engineer je pun. So you have the wrong engineer in your project, an inefficient engineer, that could be your problem. As simple as that. So the concern is basically the people. Check on the people. If your people is good, perfect, everything is going well, then check the people should be able to check on the process. Okay, so are the processes being delivered well? Are there issues with supplier and so on? If let's say those are well and everything is moving smoothly, then you might input the technology to assist you, to assist. Okay, so your technology should be there to assist you, rather than your technology comes in first, you change the people to fine tune it to the technology, and then you force the process to incorporate the technology. It is a bit overwhelming lah. Okay, so that's part of it lah. Okay, All right. So other than that, issue is to do with unable to attract local. Okay. So why one of the images of the industry? We commonly associate the industry as being dirty, difficult, dangerous. Okay. And in fact, it is true. If you look into the workers on site, I don't think you can find local workers unless for the engineers or site supervisors. But if you're talking about laborers, okay, those are mostly foreign workers. Okay, so um, can be a lot of reasons for it. Okay, but how do you think we can attract locals to work on the at the construction site? Bagi idea sikit. How can we attract locals to work on construction site? Ke forever and ever, it's not going to happen.
Gaji.
Gaji, salary. And how can we provide higher salary, higher wages? Because as an employer, as a owner, of course, you want the biggest, highest profit, and then you will automatically, your idea is to look into foreign laborers who are much cheaper. So how can we increase the wages, but in comparison to foreign workers, we are we don't mind taking local, sebab you have to think juga from the owner. Of course you want the profit, and given that a comparison, local is let's say 4,000 salary that you want to offer, and foreign is only 1,000 plus. So how can we do that? That it is worth 4,000 lah, and you are happy to pay for it.
Skills.
Skills, yes. Okay, so the key is basically skills. Skilled workers. Okay, so the key is basically skilled workers. So in order for you to pay local workers, okay, high, you need to have them skilled. Okay, so skilled workers at this moment, if you are constructing a typical house, residential, using using bricks and so on. Okay. So do you need skilled workers? Setakat bricklaying, painting biasa, do we need skilled workers? Tak ada kan? Okay, so if it's a normal house with simple brick and painting biasa, we don't need skilled workers. Okay, so your skilled workers only comes into picture, especially when you use off-site manufacturing. Off-site manufacturing items, such as industrialized building system. So usually, let's say if you are connecting panel to panel, then you need skilled workers to ensure that your job is being connected well and so on. So that's why if you look into our industry, the industry have been emphasizing a lot on the use of IBS, industrialized building system, or in other words, they call it off-site manufacturing. Whatever, which means the elements are being manufactured at the factory rather than on site. So rather than you build the wall, bricklaying one by one, it comes from the factory prefabricated. Okay, so with IBS, you can have skilled workers, and with IBS, you do not need a lot of work tasks on site. You will use minimal work tasks. Okay, maybe probably a few just to connect the elements like Lego. Okay, so that is one of the way that we can actually hire skilled workers, local skilled workers with higher wages. Okay, so that is how we can attract. Cuma the industry should be focusing on IBS lah. They should be focusing on offsite manufacturing or precast elements. So those are the items. However, unfortunately, IBS has been in the industry for like, I would say almost 30 years. It has been introduced that long, almost 30 years ago, but the uptake by the industry is still low. Okay, so a lot of times the reason given by the industry players are because it is expensive, um, not flexible, and so on. But at the end of the day, it goes back to demand and supply lah. Okay, so how you can play around with that, and sometimes it is mentioned that the supply is insufficient. So awareness, yes, people are aware that the IBS exists and so on, but the industry is still reluctant to use this. So I think the CIDB, well, they are doing their job in terms of creating awareness, but maybe there are other ways of, going through the industry rather than just awareness, rather than just giving examples of case studies. So there might be other way. Cuma in one of the best way to actually to attract local is wages, and obviously how to have them being skilled, and being skilled meaning to say that your reliance is a lot on this precast system. Okay. All right. So other than that, the challenges are basically unable to secure, manage the finance in construction. Okay, because this is a high risk sector, and it is not easy to secure funding. Other than that, insufficient knowledge in providing solution in for the project. This is where I mentioned that we are a little bit lacking in terms of exporting our expertise. Okay, so that's why one of the roadmap in basically now and future is where getting to know how we can actually penetrate foreign projects. Okay, so how can we bid for foreign projects? So in order for us to have that, there should be a mutual understanding between countries, so between ministries of different countries. So that's why a lot of time it goes back to, for example, the Ministry of Works. So they should have memorandum of understanding with a different country. So once they create that platform, we have the understanding that, okay, we will bid for the project in such country and so on. At least there is like a road rather than from zero. So that could be one of the way. Okay. And of course, public view on the project. So one thing that highlights to the public now, when we're talking about construction project, is about the safety. Okay. So, and a lot of times the safety nowadays is to do with the people. So if you see in current times, a lot of these falling objects, okay, so scaffold and beam falling, it affects public badly. Okay, so like now, so especially that the Suke Highway. Okay, so those are the things that actually provides this view to the public and not too good lah. So those are the challenges. And of course, the infamous one, basically the bribery. Okay, so this is the most difficult challenges because it involves personal integrity and so on. Okay, so far any question? So these are only some of it. Okay, so if you think through, there are many other challenges, but these are the most commonly obvious or significant challenges that we might consider in Malaysia. Okay, so far any question? Okay, so if not, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so in a more detailed manner, okay, so the one we have mentioned earlier was a general challenges. In a more detailed manner, based on different stakeholders, okay, so still challenges, okay, but for example, for client, when we mention about client, it goes back to finance. If the client is having capital problem, financial problem, it will actually create the biggest problem for the project. Okay, so because the client is unable to pay the progress apa tu payment to contractors in a monthly manner, in a timely manner, so that could create problem because it is a domino effect. The client doesn't make the payment, the main contractor couldn't pay the workers, and the work doesn't go through as such. Okay, so the biggest problem will be finance. Okay, client sophistication basically here means the changes. Okay, so changes made by client. So this is one of the issue, particularly when the client is having this fickle-minded. Okay, so kejap this design, kejap that design, so it creates a complicated issue during construction. Okay, so changes made by client or requested by client, and also unrealistic contract duration. So sometimes the too optimistic on the contract duration, which is unrealistic to be constructed on site. Okay, and then contractors, sometimes it can be poor site management. Okay, so it can be poor layout, it can be poor allocation of the facility, site office kat mana, the material storage kat mana, and where is supposed to be constructed. So sometimes it could create this double handling pun. Okay, so you unload the material from the truck, and then it has to be carried into the other side. So improper site management could be one of the issue. Okay, improper construction method, planning, scheduling. If you wrongly plan your schedule, different subcontractors involving the sequencing and so on, that could create problem. But this could be helped, as I mentioned, so it could be helped with software. Okay, so rather than manual, obviously it could be helped with software, this one. And inadequate contractor experience. Okay, so that's why when we are actually hiring or actually getting a contractor, their experience plays a very huge role. So sometimes you can see projects where the contractor is not even a construction contractor. It could be a contractor of IT, for example, tapi for computer lab. So those are the things yang might create issues lah. Okay. Consultant. Okay, so growth of local firm, there are so many consultants. Okay, if you can see in the current industry, so many local consultants. So the competition between them is huge. Okay, so how do you have an edge compared to the others? Every consultant can design. So you have the technical capacity with you. But how do you draw yourself different from the others? There are so many competition. So that's why you have sometimes comes into picture the improper practices that you might come across. Okay, so that could be one. But other than that, I think as a consultant, you need to have the edge compared to the others. Okay, so for example, maybe your design could be sustainability compliance, for example. Okay, or safety compliance. Safety in the sense that sustainability compliance, safety compliance in a sense that your design not only thinks about the structure. Okay, so it does not only talk about the design factor of the structure. It can stand for 50 years, you design for 50 years, but your design should also think about how it will be constructed by the workers. So meaning to say that, will your design affect the workers on site? Okay, so that is one of the way you can actually enhance your design, rather than typically every designer could design the lifelong of a structure. 50 years building, you should be able to design. Any designer should be able to design. But what could add value is a designer who also think about the health and safety of the workers during construction too. So if there are certain elements of a column which is too high, maybe the design would, you can actually produce a design that break it down into two rather than a very high column as such. So the difficulty in building too. So the constructability. So you can have such design that actually looks into taking care also of the health and safety of the workers, and also it could be sustainable. Your design, which is sustainable compliance. So because when you talk about technical, semua orang can design. So you need to actually think of how to market your design as such that you have the added value compared to the others. Okay, so that's one lah. Other than that, consultant have to adopt environmental friendly operation. Okay, so environmental friendly facilities nowadays. Okay, so there is no more design which you do not think about green. So the material that you might incorporate in your design could be actually green friendly and so on. Okay. Other than that, efficient management on their own offices doesn't matter. Okay. And challenges in terms of labor workers, we have a lot of illegal immigrant. Okay. And why are they available? Because they're cheap, and locals could not work as such. So a lot of actually factors that trigger that we still rely on immigrant workers. And when we talk about illegal, they are much more cheaper. So, profit and that it comes into that lah, basically. Okay. Shortage of workforces, local workforces basically, and lack of skilled labor. So sometimes the lack of skilled labor goes back into the demand. If the IBS is not in demand, then there's no point having this skilled worker, tapi the demand for IBS is not there. So it's like a chicken and egg story. Which one comes first? So it's quite a complex situation lah, because here the government is basically pushing for IBS, and here the industry is not finding it attractive enough. So those are some scenarios which needs to be addressed. Okay, other than that, in terms of the challenges, okay, so inefficient and effective method. So it's typically more or less the same. Okay, inability to attract local workers, difficult to secure. So also this is just a summary of it. Okay, so basically these are just summary. The client sophistication is due to the changes, okay, during construction, late payment, time constraint due to the too optimistic time, which is unrealistic. Okay, so cost overrun during construction, inexperienced management, usually the absentee is because it goes back to the payment. Okay, lack of skilled workers. Still I mentioned that the lack of skilled worker, it goes back to the demand, whether there are demands for actually installing elements which require skilled workers. Okay, inability to develop local workforce. So this is one of the major issues sebenarnya. Okay, so we are unable to actually get the local workforce. Of course, it goes back to the wages lah, because of the wages. Huge number of foreign workers. Okay, what are the issues when we're talking about foreign workers? Why do we actually emphasizing that to reduce foreign workers? Why? What is the problem?
Permit kerja.
Permit kerja, okay. It's difficult to get. Okay, other than that, why is, or not we, why is the government, actually the government is moving towards reducing foreign workers. They are trying their having this roadmap and so on to reduce our reliance on foreign workers. But why?
To give more opportunity for local workers.
Okay, to give more opportunity, but local workers are not even competing with them. We don't want to work on the site pun. Maybe, okay, true, is one of the way. once you actually reduce giving the opportunity to local and not relying on foreign workers, so it kind of forced the industry into, okay, because we don't have foreign workers, we might need to use IBS because we don't have that sufficient foreign workers to conduct this on-site construction. So it could be in a certain way actually kind of like force or direct or corner local industry to change to IBS. So change to IBS, they might get in skilled workers of local. Okay. What else? Why else do we you know why actually we do not want to rely on foreign workers? One, that one as mentioned lagi.
Sebab dia orang masuk secara haram.
Yeah, okay, illegal workers, so we don't know their status, health, because if they come legally, it's fine. Okay, so there are certain aspect processes we dah tahu. Okay, so their health issues because they have certain medical examination they need to take. Okay, what else is their problem?
Maybe they want for local people to work and then so they have money, then the economy money flow.
Okay, so giving chance to local workers so that the economy, with consumption, the economy generates well. Okay. And another thing about foreign workers, okay, so actually why we see foreign workers as a threat to us, besides having this competition with locals and so on, is because once these foreign workers, when you see them, they do not spend much in the country. If, for example, their salary is 1,500, for example, and you can see that they tak spend pun, they spend minimum, just sufficient for them to live. And usually 1,000, they might spend 500, 1,000, then send it back to their country. Okay, and if you're talking about one worker, if you're talking about millions of workers, you're talking about millions of ringgit leaving the country. That is what we don't want. Okay, when we're talking about general economy, it is healthy when your money is circulating within your country and not outside your country. So once they spend and they actually pump up 1 month million keluar, it is bad for our economy. That's one of the two. So the impact to our economy, because the money is going out. A healthy economy would actually is about maintaining your spending in the country. So that is one of the reason lah. Okay. So that is one of the major concern when we talk about foreign worker and also the economy, because they usually do not spend within this country. They send their money back. That's one of the major issue. Okay. Other than that, I think not much on economy as such. Okay, and also goes back to the local workers in terms of economy. We want the money to be spent within the country and so on. Okay, I think social issue is not an issue because even without them we have social issue pun. Okay, all right. Next, safety liability and also inflation. Okay, so those are the challenges, especially inflation. When the economy is bad, you can see construction is one of the highly impacted industry. Okay, so now as such, there are a lot of retrenchment and so on. So that we are highly volatile basically in regards to economy lah. Okay, all right. So factors contributing to delays. There are many factors. Okay, however, these are just some of it. Okay, so for example, if there are issues with land acquisition, okay, so this could be actually should be solved at the very initial stage by the client. So it's very much on the client getting the ownership of the land. Sometimes that's why it goes back to the local council. For example, if a land is basically for agricultural, you want to change the land title to manufacturing, might be difficult. Okay, so that's why land acquisition should be really thought of at the initial stage of construction or initial stage of development. Some other, you can change the title of the land and so on. Okay, so that one goes back to the state government usually. Okay, and relocation of squatters. This one those days banyak. Okay, now we do have tapi tak banyak sangat. Okay, so those days KL, okay, so Kuala Lumpur, basically we have a lot of squatters. Okay, so I think dalam 1990s kot, if I not mistaken, Stinggan. Okay, so there are a lot, but I think nowadays ada, but tak banyak sangat. Okay, so because they have been staying in that area, maybe for example 20 years. Okay, and tiba-tiba you want to develop the area, you will get a lot of backlash, even though that land is a government land, but you know they have been staying there 20 years, so relocation will take some tu lah. Okay, so it can take some time and so on. And also utilities, and also sometimes when you have construction site which runs on certain utilities, okay, there are electrical cable running under your construction, and but you need to have this foundation dark, okay, for foundation, then you will have problem. So there are certain, if you there are certain issues lah, okay, it can cause delay if you have utilities running under your construction macam tu. Okay, other than that can be unsuitable site. Okay, because nowadays even unsuitable, because nowadays we are going from green to brown field. Okay, so nowadays we are moving from greenfield to brownfield construction development. Green, basically your land is bare, it is green, you go in, you clear everything, you construct, senang. Okay, so you do not have anything before that, so it is green. But how much land do you want to clear? Betul, so you can't clear the entire land and bear it all. So the movement is going towards brownfield. So brownfield is basically construction where it is not, how to say, it has been prior used. For example, is an old factory area. Okay, so there are industries going on there, but it has been left. So you construct something, you demolish the whole thing, construct balik on such area. So actually the movement is moving towards a lot of brownfield. So and also, for example, construction on abandoned buildings, rather than you clear everything, start from zero, cantik, why not we actually construct or continue construction from abandoned buildings. So brownfield is something as such, whereby you are not clearing the land from zero, but you are actually building or developing certain area which has been used. Okay, other than that, unsuitable sites are basically like landfill. Okay, so landfill areas macam kat Kepong. Okay, so those are landfill areas, and now it has been constructed with what they call with residential areas. Okay, so but those landfill areas needs to be properly treated. The soil needs to be properly treated so that the methane gas tu tak adalah, you know, it doesn't penetrate through the ground and so on. So it takes time. Okay, so all those might take time to construct and so on. Okay, and also mining areas. Okay, so mining area might require certain ground improvement to be done. Okay, so unsuitable areas. Okay, other than that, any lack of equipment, this is a operational problem. Okay, so you might come across lack of equipment, material, manpower. Okay, so any variation order. Semua tahu variation order? What is variation order? Tahu tak tahu variation order?
Tambahan kerja.
Tambahan kerja. Okay, so variation order are additional job scope which is not in the original contract. Okay, so meaning to say that your contract is 1 million. However, at a construction site, a contractor finds that there are certain work that needs to be done, and without doing that work, the next process cannot proceed. So the contractor will usually consult with the consultant mentioning, okay, this work area is not in the contract, but it is required to be done. So then the consultant will get the approval from the client, and once approved, the job scope too, then is what we call variation order. Then it will be added cost from the original contract. So in simple, client would try to minimize variation order. Contractor would try to see where there are opportunities to have variation order. Okay, so those are variation order. So variation order ni leceh lah, because you will need to go through a certain approval and so on. So it will cause certain delay because you can't continue the work until it gets the agreement from the client. Okay, if there are delays in decision making from the client or from the consultant, and if you have problematic contractor, sometimes suddenly you realize one fine day your contractor dah lari, so that you can have that problem juga lah. Okay, and for construction basically, okay, so there are 7 strategic trusts. This trust was based on the earlier version of construction industry master plan. Okay, so it was based on CIMP. Recently, we have something called Construction Industry Transformation Program, which ended in 2020. Okay, so Construction Industry Master Plan was around 2009 to I think 2015. CITP, Construction Industry Transformation Program, it is from 2016 to 2020. And they will be producing new roadmap soon. Okay, but however, the elements within CIMP and CITP more or less the same. So meaning to say that the issues and how they're going to tackle this are more or less the same. Okay, so except the way they have categorized the trust and so on. In CIMP is 7, in CITP is around 4. Okay, so 4 basically of CITP, one is in terms of the quality assurance, in terms of safety. The first one, quality, safety, to ensure that minimal bureaucracy, reduce duration of approval processes. So those are the first trust. The second trust is basically on environmental sustainability, anything to do with green, reducing gas emission and so on. The third trust in CITP is basically in terms of productivity. Okay, so the introduction of BIM technology, the improved productivity of SMEs. Okay, so small medium enterprise in construction. So that is the third trust. And the fourth trust is about internationalization. Okay, so how actually we can enhance the export of the industry to foreign countries. So that is the 4 trust in CITP. So let's go through the 7 trust in CIMP first. Okay, so the movement basically, the roadmap, the first one, to integrate construction industry value chain to enhance productivity. Okay, so this one is similar to the CITP of number 3. Okay, so how you can actually enhance the integration. Okay, so how you can actually expand the involvement of SME. One of the important element that we look into in construction is also the SMEs. Okay, so because when you're talking about, for example, class F contractors, so those are SMEs, and SMEs actually 90% of the industry. There are around 90% of SMEs in the industry. And there are only 10% of these huge organizations such as G7 contractors. Okay, so that's why one of the main elements or main thoughts is actually to empower the SMEs in the industry. Okay. And then next is to strengthen the construction industry's image. Okay. Third is to come up with highest quality of occupational safety and health. So this one is actually CITP trust number one in terms of quality, in terms of occupational safety and health. Okay. And environmental issues, they have addressed it in CITP number 2. So they created one trust that looks into reducing greenhouse gas emission. Okay. The next trust here is basically to develop human resource capacity. So this is basically under CITP number 3, which is productivity. So this one, they touch a lot on BEAM, they touch a lot on IBS, they touch a lot on skilled workers, SME as well, and so on. Okay. Number 5 is basically innovate through research and development. This is closely related to working with the university. Okay, so to come up with new construction methods, new material. So for example, as such lah, and also to do with technology as well. Okay, so BEAM and so on. Okay, this one is obviously to do with ICT. Okay, so leverage on ICT in the construction industry. So that's why sometimes it goes back to whether are we actually trying to rely much on ICT without looking back into the people, without looking back into the process factor first. Okay, so sometimes over reliance or over thought on ICT could solve everything is quite dangerous. Okay, so because sometimes we think that ICT can solve everything, but there are pro and there are cons and there are various other methods that might actually assist rather than the over reliance on ICT. So these are before an investment is made on actually ICT, which actually takes a huge sum of money. If you're talking about something such as BEAM, a careful consideration should be given lah, basically. Okay. And benefit from globalization, including export of construction products and services. This one is to do with ICT, CITP number 4. Okay, so how we can actually enhance our export of the consultation and also our contractors overseas. Okay, so far any question on this in terms of the roadmap ni? Okay, all right, so I suppose no question. Okay, so finally, basically this is just in capsule. Okay, so the importance of project management, there are a lot. Okay, so there are a lot of benefits, but in general it could enhance people's skill. Okay, so knowing project management processes, the one that we are going to go through from the next chapter onwards, it allows you such, okay, so leadership skill, communication. It is that when you're talking about the basic fundamentals of project management, it's quite flexible. Okay, so it could imply on any project-based structure. Okay, so it's human focused, and you would be able to know the balancing between the 3 requirements. Okay, so the cost, the time, the quality through as simple as project priority metrics too. Okay, so obviously with all of this, good planning, you will reduce your mistake, reduce confusion, and so on. Okay, so these are some of the importance of project management. I do not need you to memorize this. So you don't need to memorize, but sufficient enough for you to understand why is it important to have the fundamentals of project management. Okay, so because main thing is when you mention project, it is not only construction, but it is applicable to all sectors project. Okay. All right, so I think with that, we are end of the class. So let me get back to the class. Any question on today's lecture? So if you don't have question, then I have to pick some to give me question. Tak ada volunteer ke? Okay, so I'll give you like 2-3 minutes to think of a question and I'll just randomly pick any one of you. Okay, so just have 2-3 minutes to think of a question.
Okay, doktor nak tanya. Okay.
Okay. Hmm.
Kan macam sekarang ni banyak construction dekat area-area Lembah Kelang. Kan terlampau banyak construction. So, kita banyak menggunakan foreign worker, betul tak?
Betul?
So, macam mana pihak kerajaan, dia nak macam tapis yang betul-betul foreign worker ni yang ada permit untuk kerja dekat Malaysia ni. Sebab nak ambil permit kerja ni kan perlukan macam mahal kan. So kalau macam projek yang mega-mega ni kan dia orang perlukan banyak foreign worker. So macam mana kerajaan nak tapis benda tu? Nak bagi yang betul-betul valid je. Masuk.
Okay. If we are talking about mega projects such as for example all those MRT project, all of that, I don't think those organization akan ambil illegal workers. So because their company is has the reputation. So to be honest, I don't think they have these illegal workers on their side. So because we went to one side, land lease, which are doing the project, apa tu TRX. Okay, so because such organization, they have a reputation to take care of. So such company, they would not have these illegal workers. So it will be with permit and so on, because there are companies who really concern on how many workers on site and who are their workers and so on. Tapi the problem would lie among companies such as SMEs, for example. So small time contractors who really require to make profit, but at the same time, the cost given to them to construct is low. So how government could actually that's why you can see sometimes they have this what do we call it, all this ambush on construction site. So I think that is how they actually you know, try to see whether there are illegal workers. So it is just through immigration, conducting all those ambush into site based on information from people lah, I suppose. To see into all, to go to look into every site, to check on every worker, I don't think they are able to do it. So as far as I know, it is based on, because illegal susah. Illegal is quite difficult. It can be anywhere. So for example, agricultural pun, not only construction, agricultural, there are a lot of illegal workers in agricultural, because our local is not working in for example oil palm. So it's quite difficult. So similar, dia tak kisah industri mana-mana, you still have illegal workers. Cuma how far you want to penetrate to get to know betul ke dia legal ke illegal, not that easy. So that's why they get they have all these not ambush, what do we call it, all these usually you can see dalam 999 tu. So they have all these what do we call the word, they get into site kan, so you can see quite a lot lah, but it is based on the report from the people ataupun someone informer and so on, something like that. But I don't think it happens in a large organization. I don't think so, because they for example land lease, from what we see, we observe, they have proper maintenance of their workers. So they are with permit and so on. We are talking about small timers je yang banyak macam tu. Do we answer your question?
Yes. Alright.
Okay. Alright. Other questions?
Doktor,
Yeah.
Kan contoh macam yang one of factors of contributing of delay tu kan relocation of squatters tu kan. Contoh kalau memang terpaksa pindahkan diorang akan dapat pampasan sahaja ke atau dapat new house ke?
You mean
accommodation baru ke?
you mean engineers ke?
No, yang penduduk setinggan yang duduk situ.
Okay. At this moment, from what we actually can observe, they might be given some papasan, but some are not lah. Sebenarnya you can see from news, there are some who, for example, illegal businesses, they just come in and just robohkan the whole thing because that is not their place. But there are some that if you are talking about a huge community and you might get like a mini riot at that area, then the government might think of pampasan as such or relocate them to another area lah. So banyak yang basically they relocate. So for example, a new PPR being built to accommodate them, but they will need to pay the rental macam tu. So there are some being done macam tu jugalah. If you're talking about a huge community, if you're talking about just one or two along the line tu mungkin tak lah. But if you're talking about a huge community, probably is a relocation to a new PPR, for example, built for them. Cuma monthly they have to pay lah this small amount of rental tu. Okay. Other question? Okay, there are no other questions. Okay, if no, then we can end the class here. Tomorrow, as usual, I'll give you the recording that we have done for class yang pukul 2 tu. Okay, so by the way, are you okay with that, or do you want to have face to face? I just want to get the idea from all of you. Are you okay with the system of recording? Because I was like thinking it is 5 to 6, so at least you can have the time frame or at night to actually go through the video and so on. So give me some response on that.
Okay.
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 Doktor.
Okay, Doctor.
Okay, so I think in that case, then we'll work towards like that. Okay, so I'll give you the recording. Make sure compulsory you must go through it, and then we recap it on Monday's class so that you have an idea what we have gone through in the recording too. Okay. All right, so if there are no other questions, I think we'll end the class today. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you in the next class.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Doctor.
Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.